Last autumn, the world woke up to the fact that dead entertainer Jimmy Savile had in fact been a serial paedophile for many decades. After the groundbreaking programme aired, many hundreds came forward to say they too had been victims of good old Uncle Jimmy on the grounds of the BBC, in the back of his chauffeur-driven car, and in areas that he had access to through his charitable concerns. These included hospitals and care homes. It was immediately clear to me that there were many people complicit in Savile's abuse of children. One person after another, from his glory days at the BBC to nurses around the country, confessed to hearing things about him but not actually acting on it. I was particularly critical of Childline founder Esther Rantzen, a die-hard BBC bod. She began to do something of a little dance to distance herself from a man she used to cosy up to in publicity shots. The first comment I wrote on the subject created a bit of a stir. People were surprised at my uncompromising attitude towards paedophilia, and particularly as it was in the mainstream. So it was that abuse survivors and other people very knowledgeable in the area of child abuse gravitated towards me. Some of the stories have been hard to take, graphic, haunting, heartbreaking detail, some of which I'm not sure I'll ever be able to forget. I'm not saying that everyone I've interviewed has been completely legitimate, not at all, but most have. Some people have what I call an authentic voice. They have the ring of truth about them. Their stories check out. Some of the adults, damaged obviously, have seen and experienced horrendous happenings. They have been held down by care home staff, raped by social workers, or taken out to hotels where they were drugged up and paraded in fairy costumes for people from political circles, and films were made of them with foreign dignitaries. Horrible stories that have made me, as a pacifist, feel quite violent towards people who would perpetrate these things against innocent children. So it was, after hearing these casebooks for about a month, I did what I do best. I began to take those stories out into the public domain. I started working with ITN and a couple of different newspapers, and I researched and organised interviews with survivors. As I did so, my knowledge of the subject has deepened. At first, and in keeping with most everybody around me, there was this attitude of it's all been blown out of proportion and this is about a few perverts. As the months have rolled on and more people have come to tell me about their stories, and I've gathered more evidence, I am of the mind that it's far from just a few paedophiles operating in the system. What we are talking about has been widespread and has been going on for at least 4 decades. There has been a government and media concentration on North Wales care homes and an apparently isolated case of paedophile activity in a South London B&B, a place now under investigation since MP Tom Watson rose in the House of Commons last autumn and asked David Cameron to look into the rumours of paedophile rings extending up to Parliament. So from that, it may seem as if children were only abused in these particular places and by people who are now dead. Wrong, and I believe grossly so. I have drawn up something that looks like a child abuse map that extends to all corners of the UK and includes our offshore islands too, and it involves establishment figures who are still alive. Some survivors have been financially compensated for the misery they were subjected to, but almost always with a gagging clause attached to it. Mostly though, abuse survivors from all over the UK have been cut adrift, they've been left to flounder with the dark psychological torture that has been inflicted on them. We witnessed one example of how broken down some survivors are with what can only be described as a travesty of a report on Newsnight at the end of last year featuring abuse survivor Stephen Mesham. Mesham apparently identified the wrong person as his abuser, a lord whose name was never mentioned in the programme. Nonetheless, that single interview did more harm for helping survivors get justice than anything else I can currently think of. It made editors scared to take casebooks in case it was that Stephen Mesham situation all over again. How can a flagship news show put out such a high profile yet so atrociously researched interview? An interview, we are asked to believe, that accused someone of being a paedophile, although not actually showing the accuser a picture of the man to check they were talking about the same person. So Newsnight was a mess. Lord McAlpine was the man wrongly identified as being Mesham's abuser, although remember his name was never mentioned. And within 13 days of the broadcast, Chris Patton of the BBC Trust paid out a total of £185,000 plus costs to Lord McAlpine from the licence fee money. If only children abused on BBC premises and by BBC staff were compensated so quickly, if ever, it would be a whole different world. Sadly, sadly they are not lords and cannot afford that legal backup. Anyway, seeing as Lord McAlpine was big news as being libelled all over the place by all manner of people, I extended an invitation to him to join me in asking for a national, open investigation into widespread care home abuse. I have now sent 2 written requests. I've put in 1 verbal request to his solicitor's office and I haven't had 1 word back. I find that disappointing. I thought that if there was anyone who could help me raise awareness and shine light on the issue of how children have been abused in the UK care system for decades and possibly by paedophile rings in political and royal circles, then that man could be Lord Alistair McAlpine. So it is that survivor groups are filled with people who have yet again lost faith with the establishment. There are problems with the various investigations taking place, including victims not receiving the counselling they need. There are also issues with important documents. These include the Gillings report, which is being held back because it is said to contain sensitive names in the document. For this reason, I support the Join the Dots campaign, which will be protesting this month, demanding the release of the Gillings report. Neither should we be complacent as to believe that this is all historic. Our care system is shambolic when it comes to the care of our children. The truth is, many children are more vulnerable in the care system than they are in supposedly neglectful homes. I am not saying that all child protection is wrong. Some children do have to be removed from their homes, that's just fact, but there is definitely something wrong in our system and there has been for a long time. Children are still going missing and in the thousands, and some are never found again. I conducted recent research for a newspaper. I contacted 20 random councils and asked them for up-to-date lists on how many children were currently missing from the care homes. Only 2 councils came back to me with up-to-date figures. Some councils didn't have any figures at all. That sounds like mass neglect to me. I am extremely concerned about how many babies and children are being removed from their parents, and based on the most tenuous of reasons, including disability, and if a child happens to have an invisible illness such as ME. One more thing, even though there are clear links between care homes, child abuse and members of the British establishment, opposing child abuse is not a party political issue. I am aware that MPs from all 3 main parties have been convicted of paedophile charges and I have written about it. This issue is about adults standing up for vulnerable children, no more, no less. I report on many injustices and they work on the same level. I call it the Pandora effect. For anyone with a conscience, once you have seen the truth, you cannot unsee it. And if you try to do that, then that makes you as bad as the abuser.